in the Hunter College Music Department. It's a real mouthful for a title. I think it's easier to say than, put on the top of a program. I am Professor Jeffrey Burleson. I'm Director of Piano Studies at Hunter. All semester, these two classes have been working in tandem, culminating in final projects that are taking the form of split-screen videos, since it was impossible for us to all gather in one room and perform live together this semester. The process worked by the pianist or guitarist, in one case recording the instrumental part first, and then the singer rehearsing with that part and creating their own separate videos. Then I, Professor Gonzalez, or the students themselves synced up the videos to create a single performance. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce my esteemed colleague, Professor Susan Gonzalez, Director of Vocal Studies at Hunter, who has been leading the art song class this semester. Take it away, Professor Gonzalez.
Thank you so very much. As always, we have a wonderful group of talented students, and we have literally freshmen straight through graduate students in this class together. That is both a blessing and a challenge for everyone involved, and they have all met the challenge and then some. During the course of the semester, the students in the vocal part of this collaboration class have been working on style and the diction and language. So they were asked to do presentations on each piece and one in each language. So it was quite an undertaking. They had to tackle Italian, German, French, and then whatever other language, Spanish, English, and for some of those in the class, English was a foreign language. So we've enjoyed that process together, and I'm very happy now to present our first piece. It's from the beloved 24 Italian songs, Già il sole dal Gange by Alessandro Scarlatti. And our first singer is Jinshi Zhu, tenor, and Sheng Yang, piano.
Are you going to ask, did you want to ask Jinshi anything, or do we want to show the video first?
Let's show the video first,
okay.
And then we can ask them a couple of questions about their performance.
That sounds great. So in this process, everyone, I'm going to be constantly sharing my screen and then going back live. So please bear with me in the longers that will happen at these junctures.
Già sole da Gange, già sole da Gange, più chiaro sfavilla, più chiaro sfavilla, più chiaro sfavilla. Ed al cielo stilla dell'alba che piange, dell'alba che piange, dell'alba che piange, dell'alba che piange. Già sole da Gange, già sole da Gange, più chiaro sfavilla, più chiaro sfavilla, più chiaro sfavilla. Coraggio dorato, ingema ogni stelo, ingema ogni cielo. Era sì del cielo dipinge nel Prado. Dipinge nel Prado, dipinge nel Prado, dipinge nel Prado. Coraggio dorato, ingema di stelo, ingema di stelo, ingema di stelo.
All right, bravi, bravi, wonderful.
Okay, Jinchi, since we don't have the translations available like we would in the theater, a nice printed out version of that, tell us what you're singing about and how you think the composer emphasized the meaning by the way he composed the piece.
So I paste the translation in the chat. So yeah, it's kind of like right about the Ganges and the sun or something. Yeah.
Well, you're welcome to read the translation to us if you like.
So already the sun over the Ganges is shining more brightly, drying every teardrop wiped by the dawn. With sorry, so the English is my second language. Sorry
Of course.
about that. With glittery, every steam is sorry.
Tell us how you think. Do you understand the meaning of the poem? Yes.
Yes, I really do.
Okay.
But
So
I
what's the general emphasis? What is the poet and the composer getting at? What is the point? You're singing about Sole dal Gange. What is the Sole?
Yeah,
Sole
about the
is the
sun,
yes,
about the
right.
Ganges.
You feel like it's a happy piece, a sad piece?
Yeah, it's really happy piece.
Great. How did the composer create that for us? And how did you find that in terms of singing it?
Sorry, my brain is empty right now.
Okay,
sorry.
that's fine. Professor Burleson, why don't we pass on the question about the compositional values of the piece to the pianist?
Well, it is very late in the semester, and most of our brains are empty or emptying out relatively
Yes.
quickly. So I empathize, Jinchi. So both of you, wonderful job. Sheng, what do you find to be the particular challenges of this piano part? And think in particular about when this was written and what I've already told you in the class about this famous or infamous volume called 24 Italian Songs and Arias.
For me, I think that, because this song is composed in Baroque period, and then in the Baroque period, the counterpoint is the common composition technique. And in this song, you also see the counterpoint composition techniques in this song. And the counterpoint is between the vocalist melody and the pianist bass line. So I think it's a little bit challenging for me because when you play these piano accompaniments, you have to emphasize your left hand a little bit about the bass line and also control your right hand to play softly the right hand accompaniment. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And why in this particular repertoire, in this Baroque repertoire, do we want to play piano parts with the right hand a good deal more quiet in the background in general, and with the left hand a little bit more prominently? What was this originally written for?
Could you say again? Sorry.
Oh, what was this? It was not originally written for piano, right?
Yeah, yes. It's written for orchestras. Yeah,
Well, sometimes, yeah.
yeah.
But what's the nucleus? What's the smallest ensemble that this would be written for?
I just forgot. Sorry.
It feels like a game show.
I just forgot. Sorry.
It's okay. So, continuo. Remember that?
Yes, continue.
Yes,
Yeah, that's true.
continuo, right. So, what's in a continuo?
So a continuo is perform. The composer just give you the bass line, and then the pianist just based on the bass line to create the piano's accompaniment.
Exactly, or the harpsichordist in this case. So this even the piano part, the way it's written out, there's a lot to suggest that somebody else realized this part 200 years later after it was written, and you originally just had figured bass, for a good deal of it. And when you do have figured bass, when you do have a small ensemble like harpsichord and then a viola da gamba, you have two instruments playing the bass, the harpsichord and the gamba, but just the right hand of the harpsichord. So the sound is always going to be that the bass line is going to have a little bit more resonance, and the right hand's going to be really heavy. And as we discussed, we don't want to use a lot of thick pedal in this, even though in that lovely 24 Italian songs and arias that we all use, there are lots of accents and big flourishy dynamic markings, because when this was put together in the 19th century, everyone played Baroque music in this very romantic style. So we have to sort of try to go back to the source when we're performing it. But it's an interesting problem with this music. Well, thank you so much, Sheng and Jinqi, one more time. Bravi, bravi. We're going to move on to another Baroque item. Our program basically is in chronological order here. And this time, something in English by a German composer who flourished in England, Georg Friedrich Händel. So Handel's most famous composition, the one that netted him the most dough as well, is Messiah. And this is a number from the Messiah for bass baritone. It's a setting of a passage in Isaiah called The People That Walked in Darkness. So we will listen to that now, and then we will talk about it.
The people that walk in darkness, that walk in darkness. The people that walk in darkness have seen a great light, have seen a great light. The people that walk in darkness have seen a great light. The people that walk in darkness, that walk in darkness. The people that walk in darkness have seen a great light, have seen a great light, a great light, have seen a great light. And they that dwell in the land of the son of death, that dwell in the land, that dwell in the land of the shadow of death. Upon them hath the light shined, and they that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined, upon them hath the light shined.
All right. Bravi, bravi. Fantastic. Okay. Chilling, evocative. Thank you both so much. So that was Keyshawn Francis and Buck McDaniel. So I'm going to start with some questions for Buck here. What is particularly remarkable about this, as not even just as a piano reduction, but as a composition in this within the context of Messiah, or just in general?
Sure. Well, I would say this is probably the most harmonically sort of adventurous, at least in the Christmas section, at least in part one of the Messiah. Handel, sort of when we get to the crucifixion, gets a little weird with it, but I would say this is sort of the most interesting harmonically, and also sort of that it's all sort of built on this sort of one line, sort of a perpetual motion, sort of gesture, the whole aria, which is very striking, I think, in the context of the whole oratorio, especially this early in the piece.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that's you hit the nail on the head when you talked about this single line. It's amazing how much real estate in this composition is just devoted to just a single unison line between bass and treble, even at the beginning, accompanied by the voice. It's entirely monophonic. Absolutely everyone is unison. And then it splits off into 2 and 3 parts, but it's a very, very spare part for orchestra and a very, very spare part for keyboard. And if you see a reduction of it, you're just going to see those lines. But as Buck and I discussed, the harpsichord would throw in a few little chords here and there, which I recommended that Buck do, and he did so very, very deftly and very lightly in this to make it all work.
Yeah. Okay, Keyshawn, thank you so much for that beautiful performance. This is not an easy piece to sing. What were the challenges in putting this together with a pianist online for you?
I think it's most likely, I think for everyone, it's like hearing your cue to come in. I think that's because we're so used to being like side by side with the pianist. So like now that we have to focus more on watching the video, we have to literally watch the video and see like, oh, just for him to see that he's coming in on, or seeing our cue just to come in to start the piece. And then with me, I feel like my voice has been changing a little bit. So I'm having to work a little bit more harder, especially like in the beginning. I don't know if you guys heard it, like that low note for the first part, I had to work really hard to get it. So I'm slowly like pacing myself during this time, during this new movement of like how we're singing.
Terrific. How did this compare to your other repertoire? How was it different, the writing for the voice here?
I feel like this is a lot jumpy for me. Well, for me, because I'm used to singing more stuff that's not as jumpy, or like he has a line that goes all the way down and it's like, ah, ah, and it's just like, oh my God, like I don't get a break. Like I'm just like, when do I get to breathe?
So you felt like it was rangy, in other words.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a little different than the stepwise lyricism you might find in the romantic art song tradition.
Mm,
Yeah, terrific. Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Okay, well, on to our next piece now. We have another beautiful Handel composition. The name of the aria is Vieni o Figlio, and it's an aria of Gismonda from Ottone, an opera by Handel in Italian. So I would like to present Leanne Sorace, mezzo soprano, and Sheng Yang piano.
Bravi, bravi.
Great. Terrific. Thank you very much. Leanne, I would like to start off with a question for you. I mean, what a beautiful cantabile aria. And normally in the Baroque, you have the cavatina cabaletta, which means, for those who don't understand that term, a slower cantabile section and then a faster section in a da capo form, which means you come back and you do ornamentation. It's quite large and virtuosic. This piece is a very special kind of piece. Talk to me about the meaning of it. What are you singing about, and how do you feel that this composition really echoes that?
So at this point in the opera, which is Ottone, Re di Germania, at this point in the opera, Gismonda is feeling pity for her son who's been thrown in jail.
Yeah.
And she sings to him after admitting that she loves him and she feels bad for him. And she's singing, I want to console you. Come to me and I'll console you and make you feel good, because he's been defeated by an army and he's now in jail. So I feel that the translation is straightforward in that I am singing to this person whom I love, who I care deeply about, who I have a maternal feeling for.
Wonderful.
If that answers.
Yes, it does. And what were the technical challenges for you?
The technical challenges for me, at first it was a little bit with the breath control. There's a few really nice leaps in the line that I love. And some days when I rehearsed, I had it. And some days when I rehearsed, I didn't.
Yeah.
My challenge as a singer, aside from this piece, is finding uniformity in my tone.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved working on this, and I wish I had more time to work on this with my teacher and also with Sheng in person.
Of course.
I think he did a wonderful job playing the
Indeed.
accompaniment. So I'm happy when I'm able to find an accompanist that plays it as well as he did.
Yes, and Professor Burleson will comment on this, I'm sure. This is a reduction, it's an orchestral reduction, so it makes it even more difficult for the pianist to render it beautiful and sustained in the way that strings or woodwind instruments would do. Thank you very much for that lovely performance. Those long sustained lines are the ones that I would have found the most challenging, and you sang them beautifully, so thank you.
It was a gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous performance, Leanne. Bravo, and bravo also to Sheng. And I echo Professor Gonzalez's comment about how challenging something like this is on the piano when you've got this sheen, this sort of sustained sheen of strings that are sustaining notes for long periods of time. Of course, on the piano, that sound just dies away. We can't sustain a sound that way. But Sheng did a really marvelous job with this. Sheng, what did you find to be, you could expand on that if you like, or comment on something else, but what did you find to be the most acute challenges with rendering the accompaniment of the song as effectively as possible?
Okay, so when I play this song and then I looking at the background of this music, so I feel that actually this song is conveyed heartbreaking tenderness to the listener. So I really think that when you play this song, I have to listen. When you play this accompaniment, you have to listen to the singer, how to sing it, and then you do the response. But apparently during this pandemic situation, we cannot do that. So when I practice, I just play the song and also try to sing with my accompaniment as well to imagine where the singer, she would like to take a breath or do the vibrato and the vibrato and something like that. Yes.
Well, I thought you did that extremely successfully. what can you do? What's the best way of gauging, do you think, what the singer's breath will be?
So I just try to use the same with it. And then if I think like, okay, I cannot take a break, and then I need to take a breathe, and then I take a breathe. And then
Yeah.
also my piano company do the same thing as well.
Exactly, and as I've been telling you all, breathe with the singer, even a little bit audibly at times, particularly in rehearsal. We all breathe in very similar ways, and we'll find the organic timing with the breath. We play a very mechanical instrument here. I mean, as a contraption, it's very mechanical, and yet we can make it sing if we know what we're doing with it. And one of those really important elements is applying the right sort of timing to it. And if you really literally breathe with the phrase the same way a singer does, not that you have to breathe with the phrase to be able to play the notes at all, whereas a singer has to, but you should. I thought you controlled the agogics in this very, very beautifully. All of the really very subtle moments of rubato that you added in this at phrase break. So I really appreciated that as well. So thank you both so much once again. So we're going to move on now. We're going to escape the Baroque era and wander into the classical era. And we have a cameo from Beethoven at this point. This is, the actual title is Zärtliche Liebe, which translates to tender love, but it's more popularly known as Ich liebe dich, which is I love you, from the first line of the song. So we think this was written in 1795 as a one-off. It's a rare art song of Beethoven's. That's not what he was known for outside of this amazing song cycle, An die ferne Geliebte, that he basically invented the song cycle form with. So this is Joseph Stroppel and Joshua Rufo giving us Ich liebe dich or Zärtliche Liebe by Beethoven.
Ich liebe dich so, wie du mich am Abend und am Morgen, noch war kein Tag, wo du mich nicht teilten unsere Sorgen. Auch waren sie fällig und mich geteilt gleich sie ertragen. Du tröstetest im Kummer mich, nicht weint in deine Klagen, in deine Klagen. Grün Gottes Segen über dir, du meines Lebens Freude. Gott schütze dich, stets und erhalt uns beide. Gott schütze dich, erhalt dich mir. Stets und erhalt uns beide. Erhalt uns beide. Erhalt uns
All right, bravi. Beautiful, captivating performance from both of you. Thank you so much. Really wonderful. So let's talk about the piano part and considerations for the piano part. Joshua, I won't even contextualize anything. Why don't you just contextualize it for us? Tell us what are the challenges of the piano part here?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge is trying to emulate the text of the piece. It's a very somber poem. So bringing that out, in addition to the idea of this tender love, very juxtaposing ideas, bringing that out through dynamic and rubatic ideals throughout the piece. Also breath. There are these very long phrases where there is not a rest in sight, and I need to take a breath. So I know Joe does too. So taking some time to slow down, let him breathe so that he can sing it to the best of his ability.
Absolutely, and I felt like you elasticized things really well with it. I love your term rubatic. I've not heard that used in that adjective way. It's one letter away from robotic, which is really kind of freaky. It's sort of a yin-yang thing here. But I'll have to, I think that would be a good new word to add to 2021 coming up, rubatic. Yes, so there's a lot of subtle rubato you have to use as well. I thought it was interesting that you characterized the poem as somber. I feel that it's not quite that. I feel that maybe it's more, maybe a little bit placid, maybe kind of intimate, kind of tranquil in a way. But there's some very big sentiments at the end of the poem as the music rises, as the tessitura gets higher for the singer, and as the piano part sort of thickens up a little bit. I'll just read a translation of the last stanza. May God then bless you, you my life's delight. God protect and keep you from me. Protect and keep us both. This whole poem is interesting. It's by Carl Friedrich Wilhelm Herosse, who was a German pastor. And it's one of these poems that's kind of conflating romantic love and spiritual love a little bit, and sort of, residing in the middle. I think it starts with a sort of more intimate sense, a little bit more placid, and then kind of grows into something more universal perhaps. But yeah, thank you so much. Really astute commentary.
Terrific. Yeah, thank you both. That was very musical. Joseph is one of our freshmen, so a very young singer indeed, and what a wonderful demonstration of hard work, especially in a language as difficult as German. Joseph, could you tell me what were your challenges around the language? And you clearly felt the poetry very strongly. So talk to me about how this particular composition touched you.
Well, honestly, I've come from a musical theater background. I'm really not that well versed in classical or singing in other languages. I mean, I guess I've developed a bit of an ear for it from my theatrical background, I suppose. And I don't know. I think because of that, coming from that background, I really feel like I was able to look at it from a perspective of really feeling the intensity of love, I guess. I hope I'm sounding right here. First time.
When it comes to feelings and poetry, I don't think there is a wrong answer. I was looking for your own personal insight on how it touched you in a way that you could communicate, because we ultimately are storytellers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is obviously a piece that you were able to get yourself grounded and centered in, even though it was in another language. It was clear that you knew what you were singing about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 What were the technical challenges of this piece for you?
The technical challenges are, as I said, coming from that theater background, musical theater in particular. I'm rather a newcomer to classical music. I know a lot of people who take it up have been doing it their whole lives throughout their time as children. I'm more of a recent. I started more recent than that, so I still have a lot of musical theater things in my voice that I'm trying to work out and fix. I guess it's very interesting to me to be learning and discovering what the differences in classical singing. I mean, if I could go back, and I'm sure there are a lot of things I could have done better, more in the classical realm, but
Now, just not to deviate too far from the basic question, but you keep talking of musical theater versus classical. What do you think the differences are for your singing voice? This is a very, I think, a very interesting discussion for
mhm.
singers. When you're singing musical theater, you're singing classical. What's the difference?
From what I've seen, I'm very I sing from when I did musical theater, I was very conversational in a way, and I guess I would close vowels to very quickly close words, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's I guess learning how to sing legato has been a very different thing for me, I guess, and it's a work in progress.
It's always a work in progress. You did a wonderful job. I just wanted to get some very candid thoughts on that. So thank you very much, both of you, for a
Thank you.
wonderful performance. I would love to move on to one of my favorite songs in all of the literature, the Gretchen am Spinnrade by Franz Schubert. It's a very special piece, a standalone piece. It's from Goethe's Faust, part one of Goethe's Faust. And what makes this piece so very special is the conversation between the piano and the voice. It really takes on a whole new technique of an importance in the role of the piano in song. So I would love for them to perform this for us and then to have a little discussion about that technique. Dakota Brandon, soprano, and Xinghui Wu on piano. Thank you so very much. Okay. There I go. Get myself up and running again. Wonderful piece. So here we have Gretchen at the spinning wheel. And I think the way Schubert treats this is pretty fantastic. Dakota, tell us about the text. This is a very long poem, and she goes through quite a lot of emotional stress and expressing her love for Faust. Talk to us a little bit about your process with this piece. This is an epic piece. It's almost like an aria. Are you there, Dakota?
It's really beautiful. So the text is about, it's sung by a woman named Gretchen, obviously, and she has become, she's been bewitched by the devil, basically. And she's fallen madly in love with this man who at first he was crazy about her, but she did not like him. And then he made a deal with the devil, or a Faust, in which part of what he wanted was for her to fall in love with him. But what ends up happening is she falls madly in love with him, and he gets tired of her after a while. So basically he got what he asked for, but he did not, it was like too much after a while. And so he gets tired of her, he leaves, and now she's madly in love with him, and he's no longer interested in her, and she's just going insane over him. So throughout the whole piece, she's at her spinning wheel, and she's just like, I'm never gonna have Faust. I forgot his name, but I'm never gonna have him.
Faust.
Faust is his name. I thought so. Faust no longer loves me, and like I'm done for, because she's been bewitched by the devil. Like all she can think about is Faust, and now that he's left her life, she's just like done for. And my favorite part of the song is the middle section, where it goes Sein hoher Gong. And that part, like we lose like the foot treadle part, which is in the left-hand accompaniment, that's going ba bum ba bum, and it's kind of going into this fantasy mode, and we have like these block notes, and it kind of gives like a very dreamy state, and she's just fantasizing about Faust, remembering him, and then she goes back into reality, and it goes into this like the last section where it gets very intense. And that part is very hard to sing because like it's high and very it's very intense and high, not a lot of breath, not a lot of time to take a breath. But so like the biggest challenge in this piece is definitely breath support, and just and also diction, of course, too, because it's hard to get proper diction on the higher notes also. So yeah, the biggest challenge is definitely breath, but I love this piece, and it's always a pleasure to sing it.
Great, thank you so much. I did notice that there is when I was studying this piece also in college, that there is the first stanza of the poem repeats over and over again. And I think that that's a very interesting how he treats it each time. He doesn't present it differently. He just keeps coming back. It's like she's stuck in this spinning wheel, and she keeps coming back to the same place over and over again, no matter how she tries to break out of it or get to where she wants. It's a really wonderful piece. Professor Burleson, you want to enlighten us a little bit with the piano?
Sure,
accompaniment, yeah?
absolutely. And I wish, bravo, first of all, Dakota, just incredibly dramatic and vivid performance. I really appreciated it. Shinwi, the marvelous pianist, unfortunately could not be with us today because she is having protracted Wi-Fi problems in her building, in her apartment building. So she could not join us. So I'll sort of speak on her behalf. But this is an iconic piece just in general, but also incredibly well known to the collaborative pianist community and even well beyond that. It's Schubert's Opus 2, so it's his second published composition, very auspicious. His Opus 1 was Erlkönig, which is equally auspicious, if not more so. And there are not a lot of pieces where the piano or instruments in general are, well, there's a fair amount, but it doesn't account for the majority of music that's out there, where it's imitative, where it's imitating an object, imitating a machine, imitating a bird. That is a kind of subcategory. And in this particular piece, you've got this treadle. You've got the circular motion of the spinning wheel, and the sort of heaviness of the treadle being related by the left hand there. And the pianist needs to do this very, very subtle crescendo and decrescendo, almost inaudible in a way, but just enough to get the sense of circle and not so that we're just hearing individual notes. So that's one of the challenges. And Dakota's favorite part, my favorite part, which sort of provides a relief when Gretchen, instead of saying over and over and over, my piece is gone, my heart is heavy, mein Ruhe ist hin, mein Herz ist schwer, over and over at the beginning of each stanza, starts dreamily thinking about how great Faust is. And we hear, instead of, we hear these block chords, which we always need to play with the unicorda pedal, with the left pedal, so that noddy, that circular spinning wheel just becomes the shimmer. Instead gets transformed to the shimmer. She's taken out of this machine that she's sort of that she's imprisoned with in a way, and that circular motion of the machine seems to represent her, that the fugue state, the depression, that she's dealing with, that's so amazingly communicated by the text as well. So it's always a blast to play this piece, because it's not technically difficult, but to get it exactly right is hard, and to play it with really marvelous singers is always a really great pleasure, for sure. So we're going to move on to another piece that is now getting into the Romantic era with Robert Schumann, and a song that also has a great deal of fame, and in this case a great deal of mystery to it, partly because of the way it begins and ends, and what that portends and what that has to do with the text. So this is Im wunderschönen Monat Mai, in the beautiful month of May. The text is by the great German poet Heinrich Heine, and we have the tenor Peter Richardson and Karen Shea on piano.
Da ist in meinem Herzen
All right, tutti bravi, wonderful. Yeah, this is a really amazing, unique song, as I mentioned, and it creates a kind of mystery, and it does some things that don't seem to directly go in the piano part and the instrumental part with the text. And Karen, a beautiful performance. I wonder if you can possibly comment that. What's going on in the music that seems to portend something different than what's in the text, and what's challenging about this particular song for the pianist?
Okay. Well, about the history of the song, which Peter must know, is that it is part of a 16-piece cycle, and it's about this man who's recalling his romance. But this first song is supposed to be really ominous because it's going to foreshadow the events of this cycle. So, one important part about relaying that sense of ambiguity and mystery is to linger and vary the tempo, and to be really sensitive on the keys, and to end to nothing on the fade. And that's really difficult because, like, of the touch that the piano requires to be able to make sound and be quiet at the same time. Yeah. And to work with the singer, well, I had to listen for his breathing, and he did give me some notes, so that made it a lot easier to figure out.
Thank you, Karen. That's a really eloquently comprehensive description of the piece and what the pianist has to do. Yeah, the song lyrics just seem sort of carefree and evocative of hope. Even the month of May is evocative of hope, right? We can't all wait to get to May 2021, can we? You know, for so many reasons. But it's late spring. Things are really starting to bloom and so forth. But it does portend something that happens later in this amazing cycle, Dichterliebe, the poet's love, and it starts. With these harmonies that seem to sort of come out of, it's like you open the door and it's the middle of a piece or something. It doesn't sound like a beginning. It's really in medias res. And it ends with those same mysterious harmonies. It doesn't end on a tonic. It ends with this really mysterious, uncomfortable tonal ambiguity. But only in this middle section, when the singer starts and finally sings in Wunderschönen Monat Mai, do we have a kind of rosy cadence to A major.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, guys. That was a lovely performance of it. Throughout the Romantic poetry, we have lots of references to nature. So, Peter, can you talk to me a little bit about, this seems like a very simple poem. Do you think that there are other things implied here?
I think everything that's been said so far is really well said. Really ambiguous piece, and there's something going on inside the singer, or the main character of this cycle. Something's happening inside of him, and it's love, and it's blooming, and there's a reference to flowers budding and blooming and birds singing. And with yes?
No, go ahead. I thought you were finished. Yeah.
No, it's just the same inside of the main character. Something's budding in them as well. And May is also like the same kind of month for budding of roses and stuff.
In many of the cycles and song collections, the pieces are standalone pieces. Do you consider this a standalone piece? Could this be performed successfully all by itself?
I think that's an opinion-based question. Personally, I think it can be. I mean, I did it just now.
But most successfully, if we heard what came after it, because this series of 16 pieces are, for the most part, short pieces that belong in a link of the song cycle form that tell a story.
Well, yes.
And although other song cycles, you can pull pieces out and they are complete pieces with a cadence in the tonic that sound like something is start and finished and completed. This does not. Professor Burleson, if you have the music, do you have the music there by
Yes.
any chance? Would you play the end of this piece into the beginning of the next piece?
Yes, let me do that.
So we can hear my point in talking about this particular cycle and how it stands apart just a little bit from other cycles.
Get my Bluetooth pedal fired up here so I can make that page turn happen. See where I am.
Right. So we're so used to hearing dissonance in the 21st century that we don't think about how that might have landed with the romantic listeners of the day. The end of that first piece needed to move on to something else that was linked to it, in my opinion. That's just my humble opinion.
I completely agree. And even then it doesn't cadence the way you expect to. I mean, I'm playing it too fast on purpose. You know, expect it to go to F minor. And we get the top two notes of an F sharp minor chord and not the bottom note, which are the bottom two notes of an A major chord. So he's keeping this ambiguity, you know, even into the next song, which is just amazing. This is, I mean, a mark of true genius, and it's why I think, you know, Schumann is in that pantheon.
Absolutely, which is, you know, what I wanted to really bring out and show everyone at this point. The beautiful job, guys. Thank you so much. Okay, so our next wonderful piece is another classic by a wonderful composer, Johannes Brahms, Wie Melodien zieht es mir, from the Fünf Lieder, Opus 105. And it has this particular group of songs is different poets. This particular poet is Klaus Groth. So our singer is Elizabeth Zotto soprano and Xinghui Wu on piano.
Wie grün ins Blumen
Beautiful. Thank you very much, guys. Elizabeth, talk to me about the poetry. What are you singing about?
Okay, so Wie Melodien zieht es mir translates to like melodies, it moves in me about. And like we talked about with Peter's piece, there's a lot of imagery with talking about flowers and stuff. So the poem basically is talking about love, but it's not quite certain throughout the time. It, like melodies, it moves quietly through my mind. It blooms like spring flowers and floats away like a fragrance. That's the first stanza. So it's a bit unsure throughout the entire thing. It's like, what is this feeling? I'm not quite sure. It's there, but then it isn't. And it's not quite certain until the end, where it says, but when one tries to express it in words and set it before the eyes, like a gray mist it pales and disappears like a breath, but it can be brought forth by tears. So like emotion, like, oh, now I know.
Okay, wonderful. How do you think Brahms sets this? I mean, how do you feel about the setting, and how is it effectively expressing that particular text?
We have these like really nice legato lines, which is quite difficult to not chop up with the German. That was one of the challenges. Just every once in a while when he repeats those lines, like the first one where it floats away like a fragrance, that gets repeated twice. It's kind of moving and going away with each phrase, and these lines repeat, being like questioning yourself as it repeats with slight harmonic variations, like really thinking through it, like, what is this? It doesn't quite settle.
Okay, wonderful. Professor Burleson, we'll pass it on to you for the piano perspectives.
Sure. Well, once again, Xin Wei played this and did a marvelous job with it, but she could not be with us, so I'll briefly discuss the piano part. Elizabeth Brava. This is very difficult. I think just this first phrase of crossing over the break like that with this arpeggiation is as a non-singer and certainly as a non-soprano, strikes me as fiendishly daunting to think that you have to start with singing these four notes, to begin with. So Brahms is doing here what he does in a lot of piano parts, not just with all of his piano music, really. With so much of his piano music, with chamber music and with solo music, is he likes these really big open voicings of arpeggiations where there's always a great distance between the intervals. So the piano part so there are all these sort of leaps and everything. So it's not a textural part at all from that standpoint. It doesn't shimmer like that passage in Gretchen am Spinnrad. The challenge with it is to not make it sound notey and not make it usurp what's happening with the singer or the violinist, or the more people you have with you, the easier. So if you get to piano trios, piano quartets, the Great Piano Quintet, these are seminal pieces for Brahms, probably, and also relevant for collaborative pianists, obviously. What many people, including I, believe to be the greatest body of chamber music for strings and piano are written by Brahms. That's what I feel. I think the greatest piano quintet ever written is the Brahms Piano Quintet. So he knows how to do this stuff. And I've played most of this music, most of that music as well. But he'll write in a slow movement for violin sonata, similar texture. And so the pianist has to be careful to be really subtle because they're crossing the voice part over and over with all this stuff sort of spinning around. And a lot of it is just pure balance. As long as you can still inflect, as long as you come down enough. The danger with this is you see the big arcs and you want want to do that with it. You want to express it like that. And that's just horrible. You're stepping all over the singer and, you know, letting your ego show. So you've got to sometimes just a little subtle tenuto on the top note is just enough to give it shape. So that's what I try to do with this. And because also the singer's constantly doing this, you have to be careful about what register they're in, because, you know, 2 seconds ago it could be an octave higher or an octave lower, etc. So that's the big challenge of this song, I find. But the place where we can let loose are these little interludes and the final interlude where we can really swell where the singer's not singing. And so we always have to make sure to just reserve that kind of playing for those places and nowhere else.
Well, but to echo what Elizabeth was saying about the vocal line and what you were saying about the vocal line, the challenge of, yes, that first measure is quite difficult, but it's also quite a relief to have that sweeping arpeggio. If it were stepwise for a singer, at least for me anyway, it would have been a lot more difficult. But the difficulty for a singer in doing that is not to punch those lines. And it's exactly what you're saying about the piano part as well. I feel like this is a true duet between voice and instrument, because they have so many similar gestures, and it's a lovely expression of the poetry.
Yes, I would agree. And even if the piano we're trying to stay in the background where we're not in front, where we don't have the solo parts, because of the shape that we have, you still hear every note in our part. You know, that's how the duet aspect of it really comes out beautifully, and it's why Brahms knew what he was doing when he was, you know, writing this stuff too. It's up to the pianist to realize how to bring that off, how to make everything really transparent and yet well balanced with the singer.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, now we move on to France,
Yes.
and we have, I think, 3 pieces written by composers that are 3 different composers that are relative contemporaries of each other. Some lived longer than others, but they were all born in the mid-19th century. So we're going to start with a song by Ernest Chausson, who was, like the next composer we'll talk about too, Dupas, is known more for his songs, I think, and his vocal music than anything else. He was born in 1855 and lived a relatively short life, died in 1899 in his mid-40s even for that time. And this is a little number called Le Charme, or The Charm. And we'll just play it now, and then we'll talk about it.
Quand au sourire me surpris, je sentis frémir tout mon être. Mais ce qui domptait mon esprit, je ne pus d'abord le répondre. Quand ton regard tomba sur moi, je sentis mon âme se fondre. Mais ce qui s'est c'était moi. Je ne pus d'abord répondre. Ce qui me vainquit à jamais, ce fut un plus douloureux charme. Et je ne sais que je t'aimais.
right, bravi, wonderful. Yes, so that was tenor Andre Gulick and Catherine Langevin Falcon on piano. Thank you both so much. Beautiful, sensitive, and very much synced performance. Something I know that both of you worked on quite a bit. So Catherine, beautiful job with this. What do you find to be the particular challenges of this piano part? You and I went through a few versions of it, so it would be great to hear you speak about that.
Yeah, well, it's very beautiful, and the vocal line is so beautiful, and the piano duplicates it basically. But what's a little challenging, and Professor Burleson will remember this, is that the melody is duplicated not in the right hand, but in the bass line in the left hand. So that is something to get used to. The bass functions sort of as a duet with the melody, with the voice, and it does it in parallel sixth. It's very, very nice. I thought that was really, somewhat challenging, but the tempo was mostly the biggest challenge I thought in this piece. First of all, it's Andre and I agreed on a tempo which was a little slower than it was written or edited as. We established it as andante, and then there are a lot of retards in the whole piece. So they're sort of, as written in the piece, you've got, retard, you've got un poco più lento. So it just keeps slowing down. And the composer also, he inserted these tricks. He would change the meter of it. He'd change the length of the notes, and he'd have these written markings. All, I think, trying to help the singer and the pianist know as much as possible when to start slowing down, and then how slow to get, and then how long to keep playing slow before you get back to sort of a regular tempo. So it was I think very, very helpful also to have the collaboration. Knowing where Andre was planning to breathe and where he was going to slow down, and get a little feedback in terms of that's not slow enough, or I'll need more time on that part. Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, that was a great encapsulation of the song. When we get to this this French school, this romantic, and even more so as we get later in the century, we get more and more very specific indications. Unlike some of the German lieder we just heard, there are sometimes almost every measure. There's più mosso, there's meno mosso, there's a retard. And I've always felt like with a song like this, there's almost an element of recitative, of coming to somewhere between song and recitative. There's a sort of speech rhythm aspect of it, a little bit as well, because of this constant flexibility that's written into the score. And that's really hard to bring off, and especially this was a really challenging item to work on asynchronously, I think. Normally the pianist can just follow the singer and take all the subtle cues, but it's the cart before the horse, and you guys are really, commended to making this work, from that standpoint of rhythm and pacing. I'll also say that actually the tenor voice is actually a third below the left hand of the piano part, rather than a sixth above, because remember that the tenor part actually sounds an octave below, where it's written. So the piano is going, and the tenor is doing that. So we have. So they're actually much closer together, pitch-wise, which makes it even more dangerous. And because you're actually above it, it's very easy to let that harmonization actually sort of stick out of the texture. And that's why it's really important to play very delicately in a lot of this song. And that's something that you did really, really beautifully in your final, take as well. So thank you so much, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you, both of you. Very nice job. Well, we have these lovely French melodies, and this poem by Armand Silvestre. It's it's a lovely gesture, but it doesn't really talk about specifics and doesn't talk about nature per se. Andre, tell me a little bit about what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, so this piece is really interesting in terms of that. I mean, just in terms of how it's phrased as well. Like it kind of circles around, starts on the tonic and kind of circles around back down to the back down to it at the end. But what I'm saying is essentially when you surprised me and when I saw you smiling, my being was thrilled. And I wasn't sure what exactly this feeling was. And then I kind of repeat that when you glanced at me, my soul melted. And I wasn't sure what this sudden passion was. And then finally I say, but this charm that made me yours was and the reason that I finally knew that this feeling was love, in fact, was when I saw you weeping, or when I saw you the tears falling from
your first tears. Yes, true.
So-
In French repertoire, we have this wonderful gesture called the voix mixte, which is a male head voice, almost falsetto sound that comes into it. And you encapsulate that really well, because this could be sung with a lot more gusto and it would lose its charm, literally.
Yeah.
So tell me about the approach. And one of the things that when you were talking about the piano part, when we were working on this piece, what I remember is there's this little bit of a syncopation going on here that throws you off.
Yeah, that took a little like getting used to, but I mean, yeah, I think Catherine said it really well. Just the the whole kind of collaboration and relationship between the piano and the voice is really crucial in this one. And it was kind of tough to do asynchronized, but I think absolutely, just the it kind of keeps slowing down with this the like sudden realization of my character that almost he doesn't necessarily want to make, or he's afraid of making.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so
shyness to a certain degree.
Sure. Yeah.
Young or insecurity, not even insecurity, but maybe just shyness. Yes, it's a lovely piece. Thank you both very much. Is there anything else you want to add, either one of you? Okay, wonderful. Well, now we move on to another French melody by the French composer Henri Duparc, Fidèle. This particular piece shows a different level of chromaticism now. It's even been compared to Wagnerian voice leading. For those of you who don't know what that is, this extreme chromaticism that may not necessarily go where you expect your ears to take you at times. It's a tranquil piece that really builds to a tremendous climax. It has a lot of heavy chords and tremolos in the piano, and ends with not your grandiose, high note at the end, say as Gretchen did, or some of the other songs, but a very pianissimo whisper of a finish. I believe this piece was actually dedicated to Ernest Chausson, which I think is interesting since we just heard one of his pieces. So now I would like to present Foley Brown, soprano, and Test Loca on piano. Duparc's Fidèle. Okay, thank you guys very much. Beautiful. Kind of another epic piece on this program. Follet, this is in French. It's a difficult language for young singers to learn because it really causes us to think about how we use our face muscles and our tongue and our jaw and to make sounds that we're not used to making in the English language for those of us who are native speaking English. So talk to me about some of the challenges in working with the French and technical issues with this particular piece.
Yeah, just to echo what you're saying, you know, French kind of helps you out in a sense because it's like a brighter type of language where you can kind of get, like you say, on the edge of the chord and really bring out those nuances. But particularly in this piece, I even start off, you know, with my middle voice and it's still having to kind of come out and be expressive. So that was a very, very difficult part for me, just still staying grounded and trying to, again, stay on the edge of those chords.
Yeah. The larger scale phrases that lead us to this climax that takes a while to get to. How did you go about pacing yourself for that? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I tried not to, I don't know if this is going to sound terrible, but I try not to listen too much to what was happening to the piano because, you know, the piano is just doing something completely different. And meanwhile, I have to kind of stay like, you know, legato and grounded in my phrases. And so I had to make sure that, you know, I was taking good breaths and really trying to, you know, keep those phrases alive, especially when it gets to the high notes.
Yeah. It has a slow build, which is sometimes very difficult for singers, for sure. Professor Burleson, would you like to move on to the piano?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, Tess, bravi to both of you. Tess, you had definitely one of the more difficult and extensive piano parts in the program today. What are its particular challenges? You could almost say, what aren't its particular challenges with this particular accompaniment? But what maybe a couple of things that you found the most that maybe took the longest to really get settled in your playing and in your conception?
Well, the piece goes through a lot of tempo changes, so always counting. I did a lot of counting and making sure that I kept in tempo with Follet through the different the breaths and the rubatos that we both decided to take. One of the, I think, biggest challenges for me was trying to bring out the downbeats and the important beats to try and sort of map out the tremolo section, because doing a bunch of tremolos can kind of overpower the rest of what's happening. So trying to bring out the downbeats was something I tried to do. And also doing the tremolos and jumping down to an octave while also trying to play the melody and the pinky in my right hand was difficult. But I think it came out well. That was actually the first time I heard it with Follet. So,
oh, wow.
Follet, you did really good.
Yeah, you both did really well, and it just you meshed wonderfully. Follet, you were about to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I just have to say the hardest part for me about the piece was the last part where I didn't say anything. That's the hardest part. Just, you know, still staying within the piece and, you know, being present.
There's a long postlude in this, and there's a tradition to that certainly in song. I think Schumann is really the first composer to bring us long preludes, interludes, particularly postludes at the ends of cycles. Think of the end of Frauenliebe and Leben, for example, and what you have to, do as you're standing there on stage, through all of that. And this, I'm glad you brought up the tremolos, Tess, because this is to me very much like playing a Strauss song that's really an orchestral piece. I mean, it's essentially an orchestral reduction, and it's trying to be orchestral with all of these bloody tremolos all over the place. And that's something that we talked about a lot in collaborative piano class, that tremolos are sometimes it's just sustained strings, but it's actually strings not doing that, but literally repeating the same, like the second violins will be repeating a single note of the chord, and the first violins will be repeating another note of the chord. So that's something that absolutely cannot be approximated on the piano at all. So we're going back and forth between two elements of the chord, and we have to make it a kind of texture, and we vary the speed of that texture depending on what register we're in. If we're really low, we can kind of have a really deep pedal and go slowly and play very softly, and then you don't hear the individual repetitions of the notes. Or if you're higher, you have to go faster. It's really, it can be a pain with all the approximations and everything. And tremolos can sound really corny if you're not doing them right. You get this sort of, with the diminished seventh chords, kind of silent movie music. But I thought you handled them beautifully, the way you nuanced them. You started each one like a little bit slowly and sped it up, and you gave us what Tess was talking about with the downbeats. It's important to have a little accent at the places where the chord changes, so that it's really obvious. Otherwise, it can be very vague with all that noodling going on where the harmonies actually change. So for the singer's sake and for the listener's sake, that's an issue. So that's an extremely challenging element of this, actually rather virtuosic piano part, but you handled it fantastically. So bravo again. So we're moving on now to not our final French piece, but our final French piece for voice and piano. And we're ending with the most famous one of these three by far. This is Après un rêve, After a Dream, by Gabriel Fauré. I think it's probably his most famous art song, his most well-known melody. And it's often done as an encore piece because everybody knows it, and it's got a lot of its own particular challenges, to be sure. And we will listen to Elizabeth Zotto and Da Un Chang play Après un rêve. Bravi, very captivating. Thank you so much. Both of you, very splendid performance. So, Daun, we talked rather a lot about this, about the piano part and its challenges in this. It's almost a sight-readable piano part, just in terms of the chords, and it's kind of monotextural in the sense that it's just these repeated eighth note chords in the right hand and eighth notes, and a bass line. So there's not much variety and textural variety at all going on in the piano part. But what's difficult about it?
Yeah, just like you said, Professor, it's like constant eighth notes throughout basically the whole song in the right hand, which just the piano part itself, it was very simple to read, but then I'm taking it in context of like a song like with the voice. That's where like the challenges came in, considering that the melody is there's not a lot of time and space for the singer to breathe, and unfortunately I didn't have a chance to meet with this singer. This is not my first time seeing this actually, and so but we couldn't discuss like the breaks and the breaths. But what I noticed in a lot of different versions that I listened to is a lot of singers take their rests and their breaths around the same time because the melody like is so elongated that there's only certain points of the song where like the singers can take their breaths. And so learning the melody, learning how to sing it like myself, not that I'm a good singer by any means, but learning how to sing it and like where the breath should go so that the singer can feel the most comfortable. I think that was the most challenging part of it. Yeah, like adding like rubato and lengthening certain phrases for the singer.
Yes, absolutely. And we also talked about how if you play the piano part by itself, and if you just played the piano part by itself, you would play, all the eighth notes evenly. Maybe you would stretch them evenly in places, but there's some places where you just have to stop randomly not randomly, but at the end of a phrase where breath is taking place on an eighth note and just lengthen it and create a phrase out of it that by itself sounds really bizarre and awkward, but only works with the singing part, and it becomes really obvious when you're just playing these eighth note chords over and over. So it's a challenge. It's almost like a pop piano part, with this ostinato, but we can't play it like that because it's not going to be rhythmic, in that sort of way. So yeah, thank you very much, Daun. That really, I think, encapsulated the challenges of the piano part very well.
Thank you both, Elizabeth. Wonderful on the text. I think the link here is in seeing, and when you're looking at the piano part and this long sustained vocal line right on the passaggio, or for those who don't understand what that is, it's an area of the voice where it's in transition. So it's a difficult song in many ways. But what captures me about this is it has 3 verses. And in those 3 verses of this poem, there's an emotional transition. Elizabeth, talk to us about what's going on in those 3 separate verses that brings us to this ending, and how that might affect the pianist's interpretation of that as well.
Okay, so as we said, the présent rêve means after a dream.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting emotionally to think about this piece. It's the whole kind of journey of it is you woke up from the most wonderful dream you could possibly imagine. You're with the person you love. So in this first verse, you're kind of saying, oh, in this dream, I saw you were there. And I was so happy and great. And it kind of progresses on to say how this dream progressed and how even more fantastical, you called me and I left the earth, kind of fantastical. And then as we get to that crescendo, hélas, hélas,
in verse 3, we are in verse 3 at this point, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So alas, I've woken up. I'm devastated. I want to go back to this dream. Oh night, come back, return, O radiant one, return, O night mysterious.
Yes, yeah. So it has this ongoing build that is quite different from the Du Parc, but one that has an intensity that can be built into the way that the pianist accompanies you in the meaning of this piece and bringing out the meaning of it. I thought it was wonderful how you brought us to that moment of hélas and revient. Thank you guys very much. Professor Burleson, anything else you wanted to comment on that?
No. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we covered all of
Yeah.
the really essential features of this iconic song. So yeah, I think we can move on to our final duo of French compositions, which I believe you're up to introduce next.
Yes. We're presenting 2 out of 3 of these wonderful songs written by, I believe the entire name, Louis Victor Jules Vierne, or Louis Vierne, as we know, organist composer. And of course, he lived from 1870 to 1937, somewhere along there. So we have a little different conversation in the musical harmony here. The 3 pieces are about the times of day and written for organ and voice. So it's a collection called the Les Angelus, Opus 57. And this particular one, Au Matin, is the first one. And our singer, Kurie Kiyohara, soprano, and Buck McDaniel on the organ. Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Terrific. Thank you so much, guys. A very different type of piece than anything else we've heard today. Courrier, tell us what is the poem saying? What are you talking about?
Okay, so the poetry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The poetry depicts how night flees away and how the greeting of the archangel is joyous over a sleeping town. And at the end of the piece, the lyrics says, "A new day brings happiness or torment to the heart. Lord, I worship thee and bless thee for a new day." So it is very religious piece.
Okay, contemplative. Did you find it challenging to learn?
Yes, the challenge of recording this piece was singing without my pianist next to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always important to me to communicate musically with pianist in person.
Okay. And how about the expression of the text? There's a meditative quality to this piece that lends itself to a religious, something that might take place during a religious service or even at some kind of a ritual, but certainly lovely in the context of a recital. But how did you go about finding those arcs of pianissimo, forte? How did you make those choices? Or did you?
Well, in music, Vierne employs like small melodic units and extreme chromaticism.
Yes.
So in Vierne's piece, music combines like rich musicality with ingenious discoveries in the special sonority of the organ. So my challenge was to realize his beautiful lines in the piece. It's different from aria.
Yes.
So
very different.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Thank you. It's difficult to employ these different styles, and you have to know how to do all of them. You can't sing everything like an aria or not everything like a meditative Vierne. So very good. Thank you very much. Professor Burleson and Buck, please enlighten us.
And Buck, yes. Buck, please do enlighten us, because I'm not going to pretend that this piece was my suggestion or Professor Gonzalez's suggestion. Buck suggested this work very early on, I think before even the class started, as we were starting to discuss different options. And I'm familiar with Vierne, and I play organ as well, but I did not know this piece. There's not a massive repertoire for solo voice and organ, but there is a body of really successful and interesting works, and this is certainly one of them. So Buck, what can you tell us about this, and what can you tell us what are the challenges of, because I imagine you don't play a lot as an organist, you play probably a lot less often concert pieces for voice and organ than you do other genres such as solo, such as playing with choir, such as playing a hymn that the entire congregation sings, and so forth.
Well, I'll say firstly, thank you, Professor Burleson and Professor Gonzalez, for humoring me with this piece. I'm a big fan of Vierne's music, and I knew about this piece, and I thought this would be a perfect medium for it. Sort of the challenge with this, I would say, is, with the organ is such a unique instrument, and that every instrument is different. And so I think both movements I recorded on different instruments. And so the organ in this video is from St. Edward the Martyr in East Harlem. And it's sort of an attempt towards a neo-Baroque instrument. And so what's sort of challenging is to try to make it have a lush, warm quality in sort of this French style of organ playing and organ building, and using a very sort of Baroque tone palette. And so I would say that would be the biggest challenge of playing any of this repertoire, and also sort of generally accompanying a solo singer. You would not necessarily choose as interesting of sounds as you would if you're playing solo or accompanying a larger ensemble, because you really want to support the singer and let the beautiful vocal line shine through without overpowering it, even in a digital context.
Thank you, Buck. That's a really great, enlightening sense. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the score here, and in this case, he's very specific about the registration.
Yes,
in
he
the
is.
score. Yeah, and do you sometimes have to? Did you have to approximate it all in this case because some of the specific specific aspects of registration he was asking for were not available?
That is very true, and I think Olivier Messiaen's organ scores, which there are many, are a really great example. Messiaen is quoted as saying a lot of times that when he wrote these pieces, Messiaen being someone out of the same tradition as Louis Vierne, when he wrote these pieces, he was sort of specifically thinking of his instrument La Trinité, and he would expect any organist playing it outside of La Trinité to adapt these registrations. And so Messiaen sort of being the sort of the later part of that French organist composer tradition, I think that his philosophies are applicable here.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much. I'll curtail further discussion, I think, just a bit because we have one more movement of this, the final movement of these three pieces. And this is basically the three movements cover a day. We have au matin, the morning, au midi, the middle of the day is the second movement, which we won't be hearing, but we're going to move directly on as we have moved on into the evening now. We started in the afternoon to au soir, to the evening from the same set. This is the third movement. And now we have Leanne Kalman joining Buck this time for Au Soir, the third movement of Les Angelus by Vierne. Okay. Bravi ancora.
Yes.
Wonderful. Marvelous. Very, very captivating, very spiritually uplifting. So just along the same lines, Buck, what do you think are what are the primary differences in these two movements for the organist, for consideration of what you need to be doing? And you're playing on a different instrument this time, right?
I am on a different instrument, and I would say that the instrument we just heard is very well suited for French Romantic music. It's at Church of the Resurrection on 74th Street, and it is by a Canadian builder, and the stops are in French. And the way everything's laid out is both extremely French and curiously English. But I would say the general affect is slightly different, and the way he uses the organ is slightly different in that there's these sort of long passages for solo organ at the beginning and the end that sort of are very evocative of the text and evening bells, especially namely in the pedals.
Yes, this one comes off as a lot more chant-like to me than Au Matin, and you've got the singer on one note much of the time, just doing something that is literally chant, that's evoking medieval chant in a lot of ways. You've got the organist also just playing these higher F sharps and sort of an inverted pedal point, if you will, with the F sharps and top, and so that seems to be a very different feature. And then you get actually much richer harmonies happening in the center of the piece, and then you end on this this sort of cluster harmony. It's basically a major 13th chord with, which is also very French, and it's kind of chord that Messiaen might have used as well. Just sort of all these glorious upper overtones, just ringing, at that point. It's every note of the chord except every note of the B major scale except for the fourth note. So it's hexachord basically. So fantastic! It's a wonderful spiritual conclusion to this set. Thank you.
Great. Yes, thank you both. That was really beautifully sung, Leon. I think the challenge with this piece is taking a chant like this and keeping it interesting. So tell me about the poetry. What are you saying, and how did you find some kind of line of communication with the phrasing?
Yes, so as Professor Burleson was saying earlier, these three parts of the day are the three Angeluses of the times of the day that we pray. So a lot of the text goes back to this idea of we are praying during this final Angelus and the night has risen. We want mercy from the Virgin Mary, and that we no longer need to worry about the cares of the day, because now night has come and then a new day will begin tomorrow. So for me, I did struggle with this piece when trying to sing along with the organ recording in my headphones, because it is a very chanty piece. It's difficult to stay on track of where I am in the piece, because a lot of the phrases throughout it do also tend to start similarly. I tried to follow the what was going on in the organ as much as I could when it came to keeping the line going and keeping it engaging, because there were times where the organ was starting to be more chromatic, and it would come to more climactic points. So I really just tried to follow along with what Buck was doing in the organ and try to be as tuned as I could be, considering that I couldn't be there in person. I think that's one of the things that differed with this piece versus the piece that I did with piano, is that I've sung with organ in a church before, and I feel like it's very, very different when you're in the actual environment and you're able to be there with all those belonging notes. But I had a lot of fun with this piece.
Excellent. I think the secret to doing any piece that has a parlando line or chant line such as this is to really lean on the language, which you should be doing, of course, anyway, but even more so in a piece like this, where bringing out the accented syllables and coloring those vowels in a way that gives it motion, propels it forward. It also helps the pianist, organist, guitarist, whomever, orchestra conductor, to follow you and to find the expression through the words. Beautifully done on both parts. Thank you very much, Buck and Leon. So
Sorry,
now,
Susan.
yes.
May I please add one thing about the composer?
Please.
Okay, thank you. So when I first studied about this composer Vierne, I was impressed because Vierne was born blind and became the most prestigious organ post in France from 1900 to 1937. So he gained his sight at age 6 and entered the Paris Conservatory and took the conservatory's first prize for organ in 1894. And in 1900, he won a competition for the prestigious post of titular organist at Notre Dame de Paris. So it is so great to know he overcome difficulties and become a great composer. I just wanted to add this.
Thank you so much. And I think as we've studied these wonderful composers in this class, many of them had life crippling issues. Beethoven with his hearing, and Schumann with his mental health issues, Schubert with his physical health issues. So we see this throughout the 19th century with the composers, and how, the pain and challenge of those afflictions really fed into their creativity. One can only hope, because what they produced was truly fantastic. So thank you for adding that, and it gave us an opportunity to kind of highlight the fact that yes, through adversity comes great creativity, I think.
Thank you.
Well, wonderful. So on that note, we finish with two very wonderful movements from the Siete Canciones Populares Españolas by Manuel de Falla. This is the first and third of 6 pieces, I believe, and very different in flavor and poetry. And this time we have Alexander Valencia on guitar and Gabriela Rodriguez Cruz soprano. So I think it might be best, maybe we should do both of them back to back, since we have the same singer and guitarist team, and then we can wrap up our evening with a little conversation about the cycle.
That would be great. So I will do that. They are separate videos, so there might be a little bit of time in between each one. And sometimes when you share a certain screen, like with QuickTime, and then you close it to open a different QuickTime video, it will, yes, it will sort of sign out. So I'll try to make it as unglitchy as possible and as back to back as possible. So bear with me.
Terrific. And this is the first, El Baño Moruno, and the third, Asturiana.
precio se vende, ¿por qué perdió su valor? ¿Por qué perdió su valor? Por ver si me consolaba, arrímeme a un pino verde, por ver si me consolaba. Por verme llorar, lloraba. Y el vino como era verde, por verme llorar, lloraba.
Wonderful. So, Gabriela, tell us, what are you singing about in this first piece and this third of the 7 songs?
So to start with El Paño Moruno,
Yes.
I'll read the text to you because it's quite short. On the delicate fabric in the shop, there fell a stain. It sells for less, for it has lost its value. Considering the fact that it's as short as it is, it's only 4 lines of text. I assumed that it was a pretty straightforward piece, like nothing too abstract. But after working on it for some time, I realized that there were more opportunities to explore, like whether, because you yourself, Professor Gonzalez, had mentioned to me that like taking into consideration like historical context, because Moruno is translated into English is Moorish. So taking into consideration the relationship that the Moors had with Spain, and seeing as De Falla as a Spanish composer, is he mocking the stain? Is he being playful? And so this piece has a lot of flavor, and I wish that I took that into consideration a little bit more, and maybe threw in a smile in there every now and then to kind of reflect that playfulness.
It's important to also highlight that these are folk songs, the texts. And what's the difference in the folk song texts and say a more formal text? What did you observe about this and the compared to the other pieces you were working on?
Well, I had to approach all my pieces this semester with a lot of consideration, but it's almost as though these two pieces from this song cycle compared to the other pieces I worked on this semester weren't so focused on the technical aspects of the music. It was more focused on the character and how to bring that out and how the singer can reflect what they are saying from the text. So I mean, I was thankful that this is a language that I'm native to, so I didn't have to worry about the text as much, maybe versus if it were French or German. So I needed to work a little bit more on bringing forth an energy and an attitude that I think the text reflects.
Talk to me briefly now about the difference. Asturiana, what are you singing about here?
Okay, this is also a very short piece in terms of text. I'll read to you. To see if it might console me, I drew near a green pine. To see me weep, it wept. And the pine, since it was green, wept to see me weeping. Still not quite as abstract, but as you can probably just see from me reading it out loud, it's like a complete 180 from the first movement. So I think Defaya did a really good job at bringing out the mood of the text through the long legato lines, because this piece is deceptively easy. Like you think, oh, okay, the register is not that wide, you don't go too high, too low, but you need to support yourself and you need to constantly be thinking about what you're singing about, so that way it doesn't grow too stagnant.
Yes, it has. What is the mood of this third piece? It versus the playfulness of the first one.
I would say it's somber, melancholic, but also tender in a way. So I think the juxtaposition between that really shows from the mood that the guitar accompaniment provides and the voice line that I was in charge of.
Okay. And Asturiana, where are we talking about? A specific area, a place, a person? What are you talking about?
Yeah, the title of the piece alludes to a region in Spain, and Defaya took 7 folk songs from different regions of Spain. So this one is alluding to one of the many.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Can we, Professor Burleson, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I'm not a guitarist, but I play a harmonic instrument. That's about the only similarity here.
Yeah.
But these are pieces that most often are done on piano, and I believe they were originally written for piano. However, it's this idiom that's very popular and prevalent in 20th century Spanish classical music, as well as 20th century French classical music, particularly early 20th century, which is the piano imitating the guitar. So going back to the source is actually a really relevant thing to do here, and bringing in a guitarist. And we were very lucky to have Alex with us in the collaborative piano class, a brilliant guitarist himself. And Alex, the nuance and pacing and voicing and everything of your playing here, I just thought was completely marvelous. Since these were originally piano pieces, and I don't know that did Defaya, so sort of two questions: how guitaristic are these arrangements, and did Defaya write music directly for guitar, any important music directly for guitar? I think he wrote some larger ensemble things that have guitar in it, but I don't know for sure that he's written pieces that, very prominent guitar parts, small chamber music pieces. So could you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, actually, he only wrote one guitar piece that was it was homenaje for the funeral of Debussy. So it's the one piece he wrote in homage to Debussy, and it's written for guitar. But he was familiar with the guitar, and I think in as you mentioned, playing this piano music arranged for guitar, but it was originally inspired on guitar music. So it's almost like a complete circle. It's quite difficult because although the idea, abstract idea, it's guitaristic. A lot of the things are not, like the keys are not guitaristic, or specific textures are not quite as guitaristic as they probably sound on the piano. An example of that would be, for instance, the piece by Asturias by Albéniz, which was written for piano, but then arranged thinking of guitar, and then now it was only famous on guitar because it's such a guitaristic piece. But going back to these pieces, they are difficult to play on the guitar because of the keys. So there's a little bit of going back and forth, changing the key for Asturiana, and sometimes we have to change a little bit of the intonation or the tuning of the instrument just to make it a little bit more playable on the guitar. But having said that, it is still very guitaristic in the style and character.
Great, thank you. You made it sound extremely idiomatic to the instrument, not only because it obviously guitar textures and guitaristic music, but it didn't betray any origins or awkwardness, origins in piano or awkwardness. I had made the point, only the thing that I hear the most as a difference is not in the first one, which I think actually sounds better on guitar than on piano, but in Asturiana, we can we can play these low notes, they can sustain a lot longer and so forth. So it's very different texturally, this one than on guitar for sure. It comes off as more intimate, I think, with guitar, and sort of more mystical on piano, which is not to say one's better than the other at all. Mm-hmm. They come off as having a different kind of mood, a different kind of context, which I think is, again, the mark of great writing and great adaptation, is that it's you can transform something and make it equally compelling, but different, even with the same quote unquote simple composition. So
I just wanted to add on to that really quickly. I also got a chance to work with Alex on a couple of pieces. I know I didn't get to present them today, but I just wanted to just really agree with your point that it's fascinating to see how different these sounds can be from guitar and piano. Like in my German pieces from Die schöne Müllerin, I mean you said here was more mystical versus almost what was the other word you said?
Intimate, I think.
Yeah, intimate. Yeah, sure. And in the German, it's more, I'd say, almost like brash on the piano versus more, again, kind of intimate and more absolved in your own thoughts, versus the piano is more of a a grandeur experience. But so yeah, I just wanted to really add on to that. Yeah,
definitely. That's a very adept characterization. I think mine in particular, which is very boisterous on the piano part, and the singer's attitude. And when I hear mine on piano, which is 99.999% of the time, or play it on piano, it's the singer is singing to the Müller, just to the larger forest, to the big group, whereas with the guitar, it's more interior, in a way, and expressing these interior emotions, almost like a interior monologue, and it just reveals a different kind of dimension, a different kind of psychology to it, and that's something it's adapted very well. And what you did with your voice, Andre, in that is that you made it. You sometimes sung with this kind of hushed tone, to the point that you wouldn't really do with a 9-foot Steinway D behind you. You adapted to that as well, and I think projected this interiority really marvelously. So yes, different instruments, different situations. We talked about harpsichord earlier. This was a collaborative piano class that had a fantastic organist and guitarist in it, which I deeply appreciated, all harmonic instruments. I also deeply appreciated the class. All of you were fantastic and intrepid, recording all of these videos, doing something that none of us had done before. Me neither. The idea of recording a piano part and sending it, of this kind of repertoire, and sending it to someone else to add a voice part is, would have been sort of absurd in the before times. But you created performances that sounded very natural and completely uncompromised by it. And I'm very, very impressed by all of that. I'm impressed by your focus and diligence and consistency and talents and commitment throughout the class. So thank you all so much. It was just such a great pleasure to have all of my pianists, my guitarist, my organist, and all of you fantastic singers too, and to collaborate in this spirit. It's been a really great pleasure. So thank you, and tutti bravi once again.
I will echo that. Just a final word. Thank everyone who is joining us on YouTube, and thank all of you who are here on Zoom who are participating in this amazing project. I look forward to learning more about the virtual performance realm and inviting all of you to become a part of that in the next semester. Have a great holiday season and stay well and stay safe. Thank you.
Yes. Ciao, everyone. Thoroughly enjoy the holidays and be well.
Number of different performers you will come across in the trajectory of this piece, in the performance history of this piece. I think Erin is hitting it right smack dab on target. I think you will encounter certainly performers who may struggle and may have difficulties, and others who will just play right through that without even a second look. And I always like to provide an AUSIA staff simply for the sake of